Welcome to Night Signal Files, recovered transmissions, lost recordings, and stories that were never meant to be heard.
Hello? My name is Brody. I'm 31 years old, and I'm calling from Miami. I've never told this story publicly before. My wife thinks I should just forget about it and move on, but I can't. Because even now, I still hear my son talking to him sometimes. And the worst part is, my son says the man is still here. It started about 8 months ago, shortly after we moved into our house. My wife, Emily, and I had been looking for a bigger place for years. Our son, Caleb, had just turned 5, and our apartment was starting to feel way too small. Toys everywhere, no backyard, neighbors complaining about noise, the usual stuff. When we found the house, it almost felt too good to be true. It was a 2-story home just outside town. Quiet neighborhood, big backyard, old oak trees lining the street. The place had that peaceful, small-town feel you see in movies. The house itself was older, built sometime in the late 70s, but it had been renovated recently. New paint, new floors, modern kitchen. The previous owners had moved out of state and wanted to sell quickly, so the price was suspiciously low. I remember joking about it with the realtor. "Did someone die here or something?" She laughed and said no. At the time, it felt like nothing more than a dumb joke. If I had known what I know now, I probably would have walked away right then. The first few weeks after we moved in were normal. Actually, better than normal. Caleb loved the house. He finally had his own room. He'd spend hours playing with his toys or running around the backyard pretending he was exploring the jungle. He was always a pretty imaginative kid, always talking to his toys like they were real people. So when he started talking to someone we couldn't see, we didn't think much about it at first. The first time I noticed it was about 2 weeks after we moved in. It was late afternoon. Emily had taken the car to the grocery store, and I was in the living room putting together some furniture we had just bought. Caleb was upstairs in his room playing. At least, I thought he was playing. But after a few minutes, I realized he wasn't talking like he normally did with his toys. He sounded like he was having a conversation, pausing, listening, responding, like someone was answering him. At first, I just smiled to myself. Kids do that sometimes. But then I heard him say something that made me stop what I was doing. He said, "No, my dad says I'm not allowed to go in the basement." I froze. The basement door was downstairs, near the kitchen. Caleb had only been down there once when we first moved in, and even then, he didn't like it. It was unfinished, dark, and smelled damp. We told him it wasn't a place for kids to play. So hearing him say that while talking to someone, that got my attention. I walked upstairs and stood outside his bedroom door. He was sitting on the floor with his toy dinosaurs facing the corner of the room. But he wasn't looking at the toys. He was looking slightly above them, like someone was standing there. I knocked on the doorframe. "Hey, buddy." He turned and smiled like nothing was wrong. "Hi, Dad." I glanced around the room. "Who are you talking to?" Caleb shrugged casually. "My friend." I remember smiling. "What friend?" He pointed toward the corner of the room. "The man." Something about the way he said it made my smile fade from my face. "What man?" Caleb looked confused, like the answer should have been obvious. "The man who lives here." I walked over and sat next to him. "Caleb, there's nobody there." He looked back at the corner again. "Yes, there is." His voice had that calm certainty kids sometimes have when they believe something completely. I felt a slight chill run down my arms, but I brushed it off. Kids imagine things. Imaginary friends are normal. So I asked him, What's his name?" Caleb tilted his head slightly, like he was listening. Then he said something quietly. "His name is Thomas." I laughed softly. "Well, tell Thomas dinner will be ready soon." Caleb giggled. "He says he doesn't eat." At the time, that line didn't seem creepy, just childish nonsense. But looking back now, that was the first sign that something wasn't right. Over the next few weeks, Caleb mentioned Thomas more and more. Sometimes it would be small things, like saying Thomas liked his toys, or that Thomas watched him play. Emily thought it was adorable. "Imaginary friends are healthy," she said. "They help kids develop creativity." I tried to agree with her, but something about it kept bothering me. Because Caleb didn't talk about Thomas like a kid talks about an imaginary friend. He talked about him like a real person who was always nearby. One night during dinner, Caleb suddenly looked toward the hallway and waved. "Hi, Thomas." Emily smiled. "Tell Thomas he's welcome to join us." Caleb looked confused again. "He can't." "Why not?" Caleb answered matter-of-factly. "He says he can't leave the house." That made Emily laugh, but I felt that same strange chill again. A few days later, things got worse. It was around midnight. Emily and I were asleep when we heard Caleb talking in his room. At first, we thought he was having a dream, but when the talking didn't stop, I got up and walked down the hall. His bedroom door was slightly open, and I could hear him clearly. "Thomas, you can't come in my room at night." There was a pause. Then Caleb said, "My dad said you have to stay downstairs." I opened the door. Caleb was sitting up in bed, staring toward the hallway, toward me. But he wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me, down the dark hallway behind me. A sudden cold air brushed against the back of my neck. I turned around quickly. Nothing was there. Just the hallway. Empty. Quiet. When I looked back at Caleb, he was smiling. "Thomas says hi." I forced a laugh. "Well, tell Thomas it's bedtime." Caleb lay back down without arguing, but as I closed the door, I could have sworn I heard soft footsteps moving down the hallway. At first, I told myself it was the house settling. Old houses make noises. Pipes, wood, wind. But the noises started happening more often. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate ones. Usually late at night. Usually in the hallway. Sometimes near the basement door. I checked the entire house multiple times. Locked windows, locked doors. Nothing out of place. No one there. Still, the feeling grew stronger. Like we weren't alone in that house. Then one afternoon, something happened that I can't explain. I came home early from work. Emily had taken Caleb to the park. The house was supposed to be empty. When I walked inside, I heard a man's voice. Soft, low, coming from upstairs. My heart started pounding immediately. I grabbed the baseball bat we kept near the door and slowly climbed the stairs. The voice stopped. The house went completely silent. I checked every room. Closets, bathrooms, Caleb's bedroom. Nothing. No one. But in Caleb's room, one of his toy dinosaurs was standing upright on the dresser, facing the door, like it had been placed there deliberately. And written on the foggy window were 4 small words. "He can see me." The writing looked like it had been made by a child's finger, but Caleb wasn't home, and neither was Emily. I wiped the words off the glass quickly and told myself Caleb must have done it earlier. But deep down, I knew he hadn't. That night, I asked Caleb about Thomas again. "Buddy, where did Thomas come from?" Caleb looked confused. "He was already here." "Where does he stay?"
Caleb pointed toward the floor. Downstairs. My stomach dropped. In the basement? Caleb nodded slowly. That's where he died. I felt a cold knot twist in my chest. What do you mean he died? Caleb answered in the calmest voice imaginable. He said the house used to be his. I looked at Emily. Her smile had finally disappeared, and Caleb finished his sentence with words that still haunt me. He says he's been waiting a long time for someone who can see him. Then Caleb looked directly behind me. His eyes widened slightly, and he whispered, "Oh, Thomas says he's standing right behind you."
When Caleb said those words, "Thomas says he's standing right behind you," my entire body went cold. I didn't want to turn around. Every instinct I had told me not to. But slowly, almost against my will, I looked over my shoulder. There was nothing there. Just the hallway behind me. Empty. Quiet. Still. I forced out a nervous laugh and looked back at Caleb. Very funny, buddy. But Caleb wasn't laughing. He was staring over my shoulder with that same calm expression he always had when he talked about Thomas, like he was looking directly at someone. Emily tried to brush it off. "All right, that's enough scary stories for tonight," she said. "Caleb, bedtime." Caleb nodded and climbed off the couch, but before he walked down the hallway, he turned slightly and said something over his shoulder. "Good night, Thomas." Then he paused, like he was listening, and he added quietly, "He says good night too." That night, neither Emily nor I slept well. The house felt different, heavier, like there was a presence we couldn't see, moving quietly from room to room. I kept telling myself it was just stress, just my imagination, but the strange things kept happening, and they started getting worse. A few days later, Emily called me at work. Her voice sounded shaken. "Daniel, something weird just happened." "What is it?" "I was cleaning the kitchen and Caleb was playing in the living room." "Okay." "And I heard him talking again." "To Thomas?" "Yes." That alone wasn't unusual anymore, but then she said something that made my stomach drop. "He wasn't talking to him like normal." "What do you mean?" Emily hesitated. Caleb sounded scared. When Emily asked him what was wrong, he apparently said something strange. He told her Thomas was upset. "Why?" she asked him. Caleb said, "Because Dad won't let him come upstairs." That night, after dinner, I sat Caleb down gently. "Buddy, I want to ask you something." He nodded. "Is Thomas your friend?" "Yes." "Are they nice to you?" "Sometimes." That answer immediately made me uneasy. "What do you mean, sometimes?" Caleb looked down at the floor. "He gets mad when I don't listen." "Listen to what?" Caleb said something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "He wants me to come downstairs with him." The basement. I tried to keep my voice calm. "And have you gone down there with him?" Caleb shook his head. "No." "Why not?" He looked up at me. "Because you said not to." For a moment, I felt relieved, but that relief didn't last long because Caleb added one more thing. He says I will soon. That night, I locked the basement door. The door had an old sliding bolt on the outside, something I hadn't really paid attention to before. I slid the bolt firmly into place. Emily thought I was overreacting, but something deep inside me told me I needed to keep that door closed. For the next few nights, things were quiet. Too quiet. Caleb didn't talk about Thomas as much. The house seemed calm again. I started thinking maybe the whole thing was just a strange phase, until the night I woke up at exactly 2:17 a.m. I remember the time clearly because the digital clock on my nightstand was glowing bright red in the dark. 2:17. And that's when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, coming from downstairs. I sat up immediately. Emily was still asleep beside me. The footsteps continued, moving slowly across the living room, then toward the hallway, then toward the basement door. A soft metallic sound followed, like something scraping against metal. My stomach twisted. The bolt. Someone or something was touching the bolt. I grabbed the baseball bat again and quietly walked out of the bedroom. The hallway was dark. The house felt strangely cold. When I reached the top of the stairs, I could hear whispering, a low voice. It sounded like a man speaking softly, but I couldn't make out the words. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I slowly stepped down the stairs. The whispering stopped instantly. The house went silent. When I reached the bottom, I turned on the hallway light. The basement door was closed. The bolt was still in place, but something was wrong, because standing in front of the basement door was Caleb, barefoot, still in his pajamas. He was facing the door, completely still. "Caleb?" I said quietly. He didn't respond. "Caleb?" He turned slowly toward me. His eyes looked half asleep, but his voice sounded calm. "Thomas wants to show me something." A cold wave rushed through my body. "No." I walked quickly toward him and grabbed his shoulders. "You don't go near this door at night, okay?" Caleb frowned slightly. "But he says it's important." "I don't care what he says." That was the first time I had ever spoken about Thomas like he was real. And for some reason, the moment those words left my mouth, the hallway light flickered once, twice, then went completely out. The house fell into darkness. Emily suddenly screamed from upstairs, "Daniel!" I grabbed Caleb's hand and rushed up the stairs. Emily was standing in the hallway outside our bedroom, pale and shaking. "What happened?" I asked. She pointed toward Caleb's room. "The closet door! It slammed open by itself!" We all stood there in silence. Then Caleb whispered something quietly. "He's angry." "Who?" Emily asked. Caleb looked down the hallway. "Thomas." Over the next week, things spiraled completely out of control. The footsteps became constant. Doors would open by themselves. Lights flickered almost every night. And Caleb started sleepwalking. The first time it happened, Emily woke up and realized Caleb wasn't in his bed. We searched the house frantically, and we found him standing in front of the basement door again, just like before, staring at it, waiting. The bolt was still locked, but Caleb was smiling. "He says the door will open soon." That was the moment I decided to look into the history of the house. The next day, I went to the town library. I searched property records, old news articles, anything I could find. And eventually, I found something. A newspaper article from 1983. A man named Thomas Whitaker used to live in our house. He lived there alone. Neighbors described him as quiet, strange, reclusive. And then, one day, he disappeared. The police investigated, but never found him. But what really made my blood run cold was the final line of the article, because one neighbor had told police something disturbing. She said that sometimes, late at night, she heard someone screaming from the basement. I drove home immediately. My hands were shaking the entire time. When I got inside, Emily was in the kitchen. "Where's Caleb?" I asked. "She's upstairs playing." I ran upstairs. Caleb's bedroom door was open, but Caleb wasn't inside. A sudden chill ran through me. Then I heard something, a faint voice coming from downstairs, from the basement. My heart started pounding violently. The basement door. The bolt was gone. The door was slightly open. A thin strip of darkness stretched down into the basement, and I could hear Caleb's voice whispering, "Thomas, it's really dark down here." I ran toward the door. "Caleb!" The whispering stopped. Then I heard another voice, a low, raspy voice, right before the basement door slammed shut, and I swear to God, the voice said one thing: "Finally."
Like and subscribe. Don't miss the next story, the one that gets under your skin. Here at Night Signal Files, you don't find the signal. It finds you.